Hey Geography peeps, so as you know, I'm working on the next country episode, which means in the meantime, we gotta do a filler video. By the way, get your Geography Now merch like this Geography Now mug at geographynow.com, or you can get this limited edition Geography Now figurine. That's me holding the globe. I'm a figurine now. You can get this at figgyme.com, and yeah, get one now before we finish all the country episodes. And if you get a mug and a figurine, you can put the figurine in the mug and fly away to any country. That was very lame. Cheers. In any case, so as you know, our last country episodes will be the appropriately back-to-back nations of Zambia and Zimbabwe. So on this channel, we've sort of kind of explained many of the various factors and details of what makes the African continent unique. However, we've never really done like a massive overview as a reference video. So today, I will do just that in 11 minutes. So ready, set, go. First off, Africa is the second largest continent in the world, made up of 54 countries, generally divided into 5 geopolitical regions that pertain to both the demographic and physical makeup. They are the North, South, East, West, and Central regions. First off, let's dive into understanding the people groups. Today, there are estimated to be about 3,000 ethnic groups speaking about 2,000 languages throughout the entire continent. For intercommunication between all of these ethno-linguistic people groups, there are 5 main lingua franca languages used between them. They are Arabic, English, French, Portuguese, and Kiswahili. Equatorial Guinea is the only country in Africa that has Spanish as an official language, and the Central African Republic is the only country with an indigenous Creole as a co-official language, Sango. Of all the countries in Africa, only 4 of them were completely uninhabited until discovery and settlement by Europeans. They are Cabo Verde, Sao Tome and Principe, Seychelles, and Mauritius. Mauritius, side note, being one of the only 3 countries on earth that have a Hindu majority. To understand the people of Africa, though, you have to look at the ethno-linguistic people groups and their respective regions on the map. Today, there are 4 main indigenous language families of Africa, although linguists will argue about the validity of some of the languages belonging to these families, but that's a whole other story. In any case, they are Afro-Asiatic, which includes but is not limited to languages like Arabic, Cushitic, Amharic, Omoro. The Niger-Congo group, sometimes collectively called Bantu, although that term typically refers to the Central and Eastern Niger-Congo languages, which includes languages like Swahili, Lingala, Congo, Zulu, Xhosa, Yoruba, Igbo, and Akan. Then you have the Nilo-Saharan, sometimes collectively called Nilotic, which includes things like Maasai, Nubian, Luo, Nuer, Dinka, Songhai, and Kanuri. And then you have the Khoisan language family, including things like Khoikhoi, Kwe, Naro, and Kung. And yes, Khoisan languages are the ones that started the whole clicking consonant thing, you know, the and it was borrowed into other languages, mostly Bantu-based like Zulu and Xhosa. Of all these ethno-linguistic groups, Tanzania is the only country where you can find all 4 of them natively spoken, with the small isolated Khoisan Hadza and Sandawe communities. Otherwise, there is one more native ethno-linguistic group that technically isn't quite exactly fully African, but rather Austronesian mix, the Malagasy people of Madagascar. Basically, a long time ago, people from what is now basically Indonesia sailed across the Indian Ocean, inhabited it, and brought their language and customs and eventually mixed in with the locals, creating a whole new genetic subgroup. Geopolitically speaking, the continent has the African Union, headquartered in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, and it consists of all 54 African nations, plus the disputed Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic as a member state, making a total of 55. As of 2023, 6 of the member states have been suspended due to internal conflict caused by military coups. Within the AU, there are 8 recognized regional economic communities that function as sort of like a regional union or trade bloc within the certain regions of Africa. They are the Maghreb Union, or the AMU, the Common Market of Eastern and Southern Africa, or COMESA, the Community of Sahel-Saharan States, CEN-SAD, the East African Community, EAC, Economic Community of Central African States, ECAS, the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, the Intergovernmental Authority of Development, EGAD, and the South Africa Development Community, SADC. Membership of these communities sometimes overlaps, which makes things complicated, especially when it comes to issues like free trade and freedom of movement. One frustration a lot of Africans have is the fact that despite traveling within their own continent, they still are required to obtain visas when entering certain African countries, when other non-African countries are allowed to enter visa-free. Today, only 5 countries in Africa have visa-free status for all African citizens. They are Kenya, the Gambia, Benin, Seychelles, and Rwanda. Some countries have been talking about following this trend in the future, but for now, time will tell. As of the 2020s, about half of the population of the African continent is urban, the largest cities being Kinshasa, DRC at number 1. Yes, as of 2023, they surpassed Lagos, Nigeria, which comes in at number 2, followed by Cairo, Luanda, and Dar es Salaam. Nonetheless, the JSE, or Johannesburg Stock Exchange, is the largest largest in Africa by total market capitalization at somewhere near $1.5 trillion in value. Otherwise, the rural population of Africa is where you are more likely to find more of the colorful, documented traditional customs from certain tribal groups. There are too many to highlight, but some of the most documented ones that you might be familiar with seeing in pictures include tribes and peoples and groups like the Maasai of East Africa, the Himba of Namibia, the Mursi and Surma of Ethiopia, the Tutsi of Rwanda and Burundi, the Pygmies of Congo, and the Dogon of West Africa. Even the largest nomadic peoples on earth, the Fula/Fulani, are in Africa, mostly concentrated in the Sahelian regions of West Africa. Yes, a subgroup of them, the Wadabe, are the people from those National Geographic pictures you've probably seen with the guys that put on the makeup and have those eccentric facial expressions. And yes, the movie Black Panther took inspiration from many of the aesthetic elements of these tribal customs to create the look for Wakanda and its people. Within Africa, you have 3 official monarchies, Morocco, Eswatini, and Lesotho. Otherwise, you have hundreds, if not thousands, of sub-national constituent monarchies and chiefdoms within Africa. Although many may not hold any official legislative power, they usually hold high levels of regional influence and typically have some degree of involvement within the nation's politics. Most of these constituent monarchies and chiefdoms are hereditary, and some are hereditary and elective. Each has their own unique system of governance and rulership. Some of the most highly recognized ones you may have heard of include the Ashanti of Ghana, the Zulu of South Africa. Ethiopia even had that empire that ended with Haile Selassie in 1974, but like his descendants still live on and claim the throne. And side note, yes, he is the Haile Selassie guy that some Rastafarians consider as their messiah and the one that Bob Marley was referring to in his song Iron Lion Zion. Historically, Africa is the cradle of humanity. The oldest sites of human inhabitation come from here, and migration patterns all expand outward from Africa to other parts of the world. Africa is home to some of the most notable eras recorded in human history, such as the Egyptian civilization, which lasted over 3,000 years, the kingdoms of Aksum and Kush, Carthage, the Mali Empire, and the largest area-wise, the Songhai Empire, as well as Greater Zimbabwe, just to name a few. Moving on to geographical and physical regions, you have the Mediterranean part along the coast of the Mediterranean. You have parts of Macaronesia, which include the Canary Islands and Madeira, which belong to Spain and Portugal respectively. In the Gulf of Guinea, you have the Cameroon Line, a volcanic island arc that ends in Mount Cameroon, which includes the islands of Sao Tome and Principe, as well as Annobon Island, which belongs to Equatorial Guinea. On the mainland, you have the Sahara, the second largest desert on Earth after Antarctica, which has hamadas, or elevated plateaus of rock, such as the Atlas Mountains, the Tibesti Mountains, and the Ahagar Mountains. Underneath, you have the Sahel, which is basically the dry, grassy transition zone into the green side of Africa. Underneath the Sahel, on the west and central sides, you have the tropical rainforest, mostly in the Congo River Basin, making up about 1/5 of Africa's landmass, the second largest rainforest in the world after the Amazon. Otherwise, mostly on the eastern and other central sides, you have the savanna and flatter grassland plateaus until you hit the Great Rift Valley. This is the only major tectonic fault line that cuts through the continent of Africa. It extends all the way from Djibouti down to Malawi. It creates a plethora of unique land formations like the Great Lakes and the Ethiopian highlands, and even the tallest mountain in Africa, Mount Kilimanjaro, which is actually a dormant volcano. In fact, the entire Rift Valley has many active geothermal spots. Just to skip away from Kilimanjaro, in the DRC is Mount Nyiragongo, one of the most active volcanoes in Africa, let alone the world. On the east side, you have the Swahili coast, which has a unique makeup of coral reefs and barrier islands, unlike the other coasts of Africa. Head further south and you reach the Kalahari and Namib deserts of southern Africa, which have some of the most stunning views you'll ever see with massive sand dunes that hit the ocean. Further south, you hit the Great Escarpment, the last and final mountain range that shields the southern tip of Africa, which contains the Finbos, a unique isolated biome that is considered its own floristic kingdom, one of only 6 in the world. In Africa, there are 5 major rivers that you need to know of: the Niger or Niger River, which feeds the west side of Africa, the Congo for the central side, the Nile that feeds the north and east, the Zambezi for the central and east side, and the Orange River for the south. Africa also has the tallest, fastest, and largest land animals on Earth. And some extra side notes: Nigeria is the most populous and largest economy in Africa, followed by Egypt, South Africa, Algeria, and Morocco. People will say Ethiopia and Liberia were the only countries never to be colonized, and although it is mostly true for Ethiopia, there was a period of 5 years where Italy partially occupied Ethiopia during World War II, but it was never a formalized, recognized entity considered against international law and the Geneva Convention, so it wasn't legit. Otherwise, Liberia was technically colonized, but by freed American slaves, making it a unique historical oddity in which it was repatriated black colonialism. Many inventions and discoveries are attributed to Africa, such as advancements in mathematics used in ancient Egyptian times. Carbon steel was developed in the Haya region of Tanzania around 100 AD. For more contemporary inventions, we have things like the CAT scan and the cardiopad. Over 60% of sub-Saharan Africa is under 20, making it the fastest growing region in the world. Lesotho is the only country in Africa completely enclaved within another country, South Africa, whereas Eswatini is also enclaved, but it borders 2 countries, South Africa and Mozambique. The Gambia is almost entirely engulfed with Senegal, with a short border on the Atlantic coast and is essentially just a country that narrowly borders one river for about 200 miles. Angola is the only country in Africa with an exclave, Cabinda, which is famous for its oil industry. There are quite a few separatist regions and disputed territories too many to list, but one of the most famous ones probably being Western Sahara. If you look at maps, there's usually a serrated line with a light highlight disputed between Morocco. About 80% of it is administered by Morocco, but there's a narrow sliver that's controlled by the Sahrawi people, or the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic peoples, that are mostly headquartered in the town of Tindouf in Algeria. Otherwise, you have other disputed areas like Somaliland and the Azawad controlled areas of Mali and so on. Too many to list. Some people claim that the Eye of the Sahara in Mauritania, aka the Rishat structure, is actually the lost city of Atlantis. Dust from the Saharan desert blows all the way to the Amazon rainforest and fertilizes it with small diatom particles. Some people say there's an undiscovered Loch Ness monster type of animal resembling a brontosaurus living in the middle of the Congo jungle called Mokele Mbembe. And in Gabon, you can find surfing hippos. So there you go, a lot of things we missed out on, but that's basically what you need to know about the African continent if you're just beginning to research it. Hope that helped. Hope you learned something. Cheers, stay cool, stay tuned.